Hey, hello everyone, welcome. I'm gonna give people one more minute and then we're gonna get started. In the meantime, please make sure you can access the chat. I will be posting some links there that will be of relevance to you. For example, the CEU form that you will need to fill out if you want to collect our complimentary ethics CEU. And I will also be posting some links to our website and so on. So please make sure you have the chat function available. Feel free to say hello and where you're from, just to warm us up a bit and get us going. We will be starting really shortly. Sam from London, thank you for joining. Oh, Toronto, look at that. Thank you for joining us. Hello, London. How Hertfordshire? Hello, hello. Hi, Cornwall. Hello, Hastings. Many folks. California. Ah, ah. Mhm. I know who is in Cali. Shame on you. Shame on you. Enjoying all the sun. Gillingham, Cornwall again, London, Milton Keynes. Hello, hello, everyone. All right, let's get started. Those of you that do not know me, welcome to our monthly behavioral talk. I'm Thanos Vostanis. I'm the program director of the Masters in Applied Behavior Analysis and Positive Behavior Support that we offer at the Tizard Center at the University of Kent. We have a campus-based and an online distance learning option for those of you who want to become BCBAs or UKBA certs or IBAs, or, soon enough, I think we're going to have so many acronyms in our field with all the new accreditations and certifications that are getting rolled out, and it's going to take 10 minutes just to go through them. So as part of our work to disseminate good practice in applied behavior analysis and positive behavior support, as many of you know, and those of you that don't, hopefully you are going to become regulars, we organize monthly talks where we invite esteemed colleagues of ours, like Dr. Ward today, who are talking about their impactful research and kind of bring us up to speed with the most exciting developments in our field. As part of today's session, I will deliver 3 keywords. Please do make a note of them. I won't be posting them in the chat. I will be vocally presenting them to you. You are going to put these keywords in a form I'm going to share in a moment in the chat. Make sure you put your full name as you want it on the certificate and your certification number, and I will send you your complimentary ethics CEU soon after the session, okay, a few days later. So I will now it on to you, Shannon. Thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself to the folks that have kindly joined us today and then take it away. And as I said, I'll be in the background supporting in the chat.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. And I guess welcome to most. I think it's dinner time for many of you, but possibly the ones from Canada and California, early-ish morning for you. My name is Dr. Shannon Ward. I am the program director of the New England Center for Children Clinic here in Abu Dhabi, and it is 10 p.m. here in the UAE, but I'll introduce a little bit about exactly where I'm from. But I am really just pleased to be here, and thanks for the invitation to talk about Assent, and specifically Assent methodology and early childhood research. But I'll tell you a little bit more about the work that we are doing out here in Abu Dhabi. So over the next kind of 55 minutes, how I plan to spend our time together is first I'll give you just an overview of this Assent research grant that I've been a part of and kind of why I'm talking to you about this topic today and some of the cool work that me and my colleagues are doing. So we'll start with a brief introduction. Then the first half of this presentation, I have this kind of broken into two pieces. So the first part, we're going to talk about Assent, and our group kind of calls it Assent the Basics. What is it? Why is it important? Who does it apply to? When do you do it? And how do you do it? Then we'll spend the second half of the presentation really talking about some current research on Assent, and specifically looking at Assent methodology as it's reported in early childhood research. Within that a review of a kind of a current project that my colleagues and I just recently published, we'll also just do a short, brief comparison of reported Assent methodology in both early childhood research and applied behavior analysis. And then we'll end with just some kind of overall findings and some future directions. So I have been, we are just ending the final kind of quarter of a 3-year research grant that we have been doing out here, looking at amplifying children's voices in early childhood development research. And this was a 3-year research grant funded by the Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority for about 3.5 million dirham, so almost $1 million US. And we have, over the last 3 years, conducted we've done 9 different studies looking at Assent and early childhood research from a variety of different viewpoints. So tonight I'll talk about one of the very specific projects that kind of kick-started this project. But if you aren't familiar with the region, so you can locate the United Arab Emirates is on this kind of top map in the left corner. And it borders Saudi Arabia and Oman and the Arabian Gulf. And if you zoom in on the right, you'll see a map of the United Arab Emirates. And the United Arab Emirates consists of 7 different emirates, with Abu Dhabi being the largest emirate within the UAE. But this small red dot that you can see is Abu Dhabi City. And although Abu Dhabi in general, it consists of a lot of desert, this is the city of Abu Dhabi. And we have about, I think there's like a population of 1 million people here. We have a research team that consists of some pretty incredible behavior analysts out here. We have been really fortunate to just have exceptional research assistants from all over the world. But like I mentioned, we're awarded a 3.5 million dirham grant, which is close to $1 million US. And this was a 9-study project that was conducted over a 3-year time period. So we're just up in our last 2 months of this project, but it's just been a lot of fun to really do a deep dive looking at Assent from a few different angles. And so this kind of gives a skeleton overview of the project that we've been working on. And we had what we kind of categorized as knowledge gathering studies, but also knowledge generating studies. And so some of the things that we've been looking at is, so we'll talk tonight about a literature review, and that's our study 1. We were also interested in surveying parents out here in the UAE to understand how they felt about Assent procedures with young children. We were interested in surveying researchers. Again, we're not alone. The Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority has been doing incredible research on all different kinds of things, from maternal health to early screening to improving early childhood education to improving nutrition. And so we were also really interested in surveying researchers on what they knew about Assent procedures, how they were doing it, whether or not they thought it was important. And then some of the knowledge generating projects that we did is we were actually evaluating different Assent procedures, training experimenters on conducting or including Assent procedures in their research. So again, today, I'll share the data from our study 1, and this was a literature review to determine how often Assent is reported in published early childhood research. And we were interested in knowing how often is it reported, what's being reported, when it is reported, what procedures are they using? Who's doing it? How often are they doing that? And so I'll explain some of the details of that study that just we're really proud. It just got published, so we're really looking forward to sharing that. And this is our incredible research team. So I have Dr. Sarah Mead Jaspers. She's our principal investigator. She is an assistant professor at ECAE College. Dr. Michelle Kelly is another professor from the Emirates College for Advanced Education. We have Dr. Javier Vieras Ortega. He has come on as our research director, and so he has been managing that whole skeleton and making sure that we're just doing incredible work and it's all moving along. And then we just have a variety of incredible research assistants, and we've had we've been really lucky to be able to spend a lot of time on this topic. Okay, so we'll kind of move in now to the basics of Assent, the what, the why, the who, the when, and the how. And before I start, I will pose a question, and you can just think about this. You can type it in the chat, but a question that I would like you to think about is, what choices have you already made today? And I'll give you a moment, if you're listening on your headphones and maybe not at your screen, what the picture on here is of coffee and of different types of coffee. Did you have coffee black this morning? Did you have it with cream and sugar? Did you have tea? Did you enjoy an iced coffee versus a hot coffee? And to kind of think about, even with just what beverage are you going to start your day with, how many choices did you get to make? And then I'll pose the question, what choices do you provide your clients if you're working with clients on a day-to-day basis? Or if you have children, what choices do you provide your children?
Just to say, Shannon, that the reaction to this is too many to count in regards to the choices made.
And that's why we kept it in the chat. That's the point, right? We are fortunate to be able to make a lot of choices in our day-to-day life on how we want to experience things. So what exactly is Assent? Well, there is general agreement about the importance of protecting human participants in research. And there is also understanding that vulnerable populations, such as pregnant people, prisoners, children, they also require special considerations and sometimes additional protections. And one additional protection that is often used when participants cannot legally consent is their opportunity to provide assent. And to help our understanding of assent, I like to start with a review of consent. So consent is a formal agreement with legal implications to participate in an activity. Some of these activities might include a medical procedure, participating in an educational activity, or maybe an educational assessment, research participation. And when parents sign a permission slip or a permission form for their child to engage in an activity, they are providing consent for their child to participate in that activity. So to receive that vaccine, to take that educational assessment, to go to summer camp and participate in those activities. And then assent is generally an affirmative response taken to indicate a willingness to participate. So when a doctor asks a child if they can take a blood sample, the doctor in that moment is asking for assent. The parent has already given, or the caregiver has already given consent for the child to do that blood draw. But now the doctor is then asking for assent. Is it okay if I do this right now? And there are a variety of published definitions in the literature on definitions for assent. And some of these may resonate more than others. So some of these examples, and this was published from Browen Smith just here in 2023, but some of the definitions of assent that they found was assent is meant to be an explicit affirmative agreement to participate, not merely an absence of objection. Assent is a term used to convey a sense of agreement obtained from those who are not able to enter into a legal contract. Vocal or non-vocal verbal behavior that can be taken to indicate a willingness to participate in research or behavioral services by individuals who cannot provide informed consent. And so there are lots of different definitions of assent, but our research team has elected to use the definition provided by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. And we look at assent as being vocal or non-vocal behavior that can be taken to indicate a willingness to participate by individuals who cannot provide informed consent. So said differently, assent provides a means for asking a child, would you like to participate in this activity or in this research project? Or by asking an individual who is nonverbal, do you want to be doing this? And we'll focus this presentation is really geared towards looking at assent within applied research. However, this also can be applied to just daily clinical work in schools, in clinical settings. So we'll talk about it from primarily a research lens, but I do encourage you to kind of open it up and just think about how it could apply to all the work that you do. And so why is assent important? Why should we care? Well, assent, first and foremost, is mandated by several international ethics guidelines, despite it not carrying the same legal weight as consent. There are a variety of requirements for how to seek assent from organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Confederation of European Specialists in Pediatrics. However, many of those requirements contain clauses such as if the child is able to assent or for those who are competent to understand. And this can make guidance on assent really complicated and challenging, especially depending on who your research participants are. I have the QR code here, but if you haven't ever looked at the Convention on the Rights of the Child, this is a document that I would just recommend taking a look at. And the document itself is long and kind of boring, maybe not the document that you want to like kick your feet up and read through, but this child-friendly version really just gives a beautiful snapshot on what are all of the different rights that are afforded to children. And again, part of this research grant, we were looking at early childhood, so younger children, but some of the pieces that this document looks at is like children have a right to make choices. Children have a right to decide what they participate in. Children have a right to information. And so all of this, it's applicable and really important to the populations that we're serving and working with, primarily for doing research with young children. Why else is assent important? Well, it's also included in the ethics code for behavior analysts, and specifically looking at points 2.11 when we're talking about obtaining informed consent, and also 6.04 informed consent in research. And both of those areas in the ethics code also give us some guidance on assent. And of course, it's important that we follow our ethics codes. I do think it's a good idea to consider international guidance. And also, it's important to adhere to international laws, international and local laws and regulations when warranted. But when I think of the why behind assent, why is this important to consider assent when conducting research? Why is it important to consider assent when we're doing applied work with vulnerable populations? I like to think of it from the standpoint of what are we teaching when we seek assent? And some of the things that I think about are autonomy. So teaching individuals, I have the right to make choices about my time, about my body, about my things. I think when we are thinking about seeking assent, including assent in our therapeutic, clinical, or research context, we are teaching individuals about choice making. you can't learn how to make choices if you don't have the opportunity or the freedom to make them. And you also can't get good at making choices if you don't have ample opportunities to practice that in a really safe and controlled environment. I think we're teaching negotiation skills. Can I do this a little bit later? Can I do this differently? Can I do this with somebody else? Can I do it differently? And these are all really important skills. I think probably even more important than some of those other regulations that we're just mandated to follow. But I think some of the most important skills that we can be teaching as clinicians or as researchers might actually be rooted in the Assent process.
Shannon, can I jump in to deliver the first keyword?
Yes,
To interrupt
please.
you. Folks, our first keyword for the CEU is trust. The first keyword for the CEU is trust. Thank you.
All right. So who gives assent? Well, who gives or withdraws assent are going to be typically individuals that are under the age of 18, so those that cannot provide legal consent. It also might be some people of determination if they rely on caregivers or parents to make legal decisions for them. Who seeks assent or who seeks assent withdrawal, we have kind of termed this person to be the adult in charge. So depending on the context, this could be a researcher, this could be a teacher or an educator, it could be a parent or a caregiver, it could be a clinician at a feeding clinic, it could be a camp counselor, a swimming instructor. If you are the adult in charge, you are the person who could be seeking assent or seeking assent withdrawal. And when is it that we seek consent? And I think a second question is to say, well, how often do we seek assent? Again, this could look different in different contexts. If we're thinking about research context, we might seek assent at the start of a research project. So at the same time that consent is sought. It could be at the start of each session. So every day when you pick up that research participant, you say, hey, do you want to come do this research activity with me? You might be seeking seeking assent continuously. So throughout the entire project, throughout the entire session, that might be something that you're monitoring, looking for, reaffirming. If we're thinking about seeking assent within educational context, this could be within classroom activities. So possibly if we're thinking about early childhood settings, you could have learning centers and allowing students or clients to kind of vote with their feet and opt into that center. You could also set up centers and say, hey guys, we have this activity on this side of the room and we have this going on at the front of the room, and you can also do this project independently at your desk. And at that point, we can allow clients to kind of decide or assent to which activity they want to do. For therapeutic or clinical context, we could be seeking assent at the start of that therapeutic session or again throughout the session and continuously. And how do we seek assent? What are the ways in which we seek assent? Cliffhanger, I'm not going to give one specific way. This is kind of some of the stuff I think our field is kind of learning, specifically how to do it well. But when we think about how do we seek assent, we also can go back to thinking about our definitions of consent versus assent. So seeking consent is a relatively straightforward process. A potential research participant or the person that is going to provide a consent, we give an explanation of the study. We tell them what it is, why it might be important. We give them a description of risks and benefits. We give them an overview of the procedure. This is what you can expect if you participate. This is what a daily session is going to look like. This is how long. But seeking assent can be a little bit more challenging. And there's not clear requirements. And so what can make assent challenging is when we're thinking about, if we're talking about young participants with limited verbal language, if we're talking about seeking assent with somebody with a developmental delay, if we're talking about really young participants, we're thinking about power dynamics that exist between adults and children. And so it inevitably just makes seeking assent a little bit less straightforward, possibly more things to be thinking about. And we don't always know who assent should be used with or how assent should be taught at different age groups or for different procedures. How do potential participants opt in or out? So again, we were interested specifically at looking at assent within early childhood research. And so this is research conducted during the developmental period from birth through age 8. And some unique challenges with this group, again, is language development is emerging. Sometimes there isn't a lot of vocal verbal language happening just yet. Comprehension is only just emerging. Young children may not be able to think ahead or kind of plan into the future until about the ages of 4 to 5. And so what that means is if they say yes today, you say, do you want to come and do this research project with me? They might say yes today, but not necessarily have an understanding that this means that next week you're going to come back and do a research session with them, and the week after that, and the week after that. And as I just mentioned on the very last slide, we also have to be considering the power dynamics between adults and children. There are a lot of children who will simply provide assent because an adult asked them to. We often teach young kids to follow instructions given by grown-ups. So all of those contingencies make assent and meaningful assent a little bit more complicated. So let's assume that we are seeking assent with a 7-year-old child. Some of the criteria that we would use when seeking consent might apply if we're seeking assent from a typically developing 7-year-old. We might be able to explain the project to the child in child-friendly language. We might be able to let them ask us questions, so we have some confidence that they understand what we've said to them. We can tell them that it's their choice to participate, and if they want to take a break or if they decide not to, that's perfectly fine. And in this scenario, we can say that, okay, this child can understand what is being asked of them, they can think about it, and then they can agree or decline to participate. But what does that process look like for a 3-year-old? A 3-year-old has some language. Maybe they have a vocabulary of around 1,000 words at that point. A 3-year-old is mostly using yes and no reliably, but not all of the time, not 100% of the time. They also may not fully understand cause and effect relations at this point. So will agreeing to participate, does this mean that they understand that they're actually participating and going to participate the next day? So a question that we are interested in, or a question to consider, is what does authentic assent look like for a 3-year-old? And then how do you seek assent with an infant? And should you? And what does it look like? These are some really difficult questions to answer, and sometimes mandates require people do it. And so what does it look like? So if policy documents don't tell us exactly how to seek assent, then maybe the published research in early childhood, published early childhood research would answer those questions for us. So we'll kind of move from the first half of our talk was really kind of focused on assent, the basics, and now we'll move into some current research on assent. And again, we'll be geared a little bit, we'll be geared primarily to assent within early childhood research. But we'll also talk about how it compares to behavior analytic research. And so I left a code. This article just got published, and we are just so proud of it. It is a systematic review of reported assent methodology in early childhood research. It is open access, thanks to the wonderful grant that we got. So there is the link if you are interested. And this initiative was similar to one taken by Main and Howitt in 2014, so 10 years ago, when they conducted a review of ethics reporting practices published in 10 international early childhood journals. And they were interested in looking at a 3-year period from 2009 to 2012. And one of the questions that these authors asked is, what is reported regarding child consent? And so one of their questions was looking at what are journals reporting when it comes to assent? And what they found is that out of 1,542 published articles, 506 of those were included in the review. 80% of the time, child assent, there was no assent documented within those published studies. And for the remaining 20%, assent was documented. But in 44% of those cases, details were not specified within that methodology. Morris and colleagues, and I believe you guys have Cody Morris coming for a talk, or just recently did a talk, and so I hope you will have an opportunity to listen to him talk about his research as well. But they undertook a similar review, and they looked specifically at 16 behavior analytic journals, and they were interested in how often is assent reported within the research methodology. And what they found is that out of 447 published articles, there were 187 that were included in their review. And what they found is that within those 187 articles, there were varied levels of description of assent. So 60% of the time, those articles had no details about their assent procedures. 18% had minimal details reported within their assent methodology. And then 15% of those articles included detailed procedures of their assent methodology. So the purpose of the current review was to further understand the scope of assent procedures described in published early childhood research from 1983 to 2023. And specifically, what we were interested in asking is, what is the extent to which assent procedures are reported within early childhood research, but also what information is included when assent processes are reported. So we applied general PRISMA standards, searching 19 journals over a 40-year period. And then within those published articles, we searched for articles that included the word assent anywhere at all in the text. And on the right side of the screen, you'll be able to see the 19 early childhood journals that we included in this review. Our inclusion criteria for the review after screening was that the article needed to include participants that were within the early childhood developmental age range. So we included participants from birth through 8 years and 11 months or 3rd grade, and that the article had to report on assent procedures to any degree. Articles were excluded if all participants were above the age of 9. If the article was a review, discussion, or an editorial piece, if the word assent was not related to the research procedures, and if the article was inaccessible or not published in English. And there was only 2 articles that met that very last criteria. So similar to Morris and colleagues, articles were categorized on the extent to which the assent methodology was described. So it could have been categorized as waived, so assent was not required for at least some of the participants in that study. It could be categorized as no detail, so assent was obtained, but the authors provided no further elaboration. Minimal detail, meaning that written or verbal assent was obtained, but the authors did not specify any further details about those assent processes. And then detailed, there was specific information describing components of the assent procedures. of those articles that fell into that detailed category, we also then further coded those detailed procedures. So did the authors provide written, pictorial, or a verbal description? Did they describe the content of the question that the researcher used to obtain assent? Did they require observation of assent or dissent? Did they require a tactile response? Did they request the participant to experience those procedures or receive a tutorial on what those procedures would be? Did they describe the use of attention used to increase the likelihood of assent, and any other strategies that were described that didn't fit into those categories? We were also interested in who sought assent. Was this a parent or caregiver? Was it a researcher or a research assistant? Was it a teacher? Was this information not reported or other? Coding of assent frequency. So how frequently was assent sought? Was it sought just once at the very start? Did they do this continuously? Were there predetermined intervals that they used? Was this information not reported or other? If assent was waived, we were interested in learning the reasons for the waived assent. Was this due to the participant's age? Was it due to their verbal skills? Was it due to intellectual capacity? Was it because access to those procedures were only available through research or participation was medically necessary? Was this information not reported or something else? And then also, who made that determination for waived assent? Was this decision made based on the IRB or the ethics committee? Was it a parent or caregiver? Was it a researcher or research assistant? Was this information not reported or other? And then we also incorporated inter-rater agreement measures throughout the screening and coding process. Our inter-rater agreement was collected for 33% of included articles across all journals and variables. And disagreements were resolved by 2 reviewers discussing the item and determining a final resolution. So our search of the 19 journals from 1983 to March 2023 resulted in 39,043 articles published within that time frame. We then had identified 2,106 articles that included the word assent anywhere at all in the text, but 948 of those articles were excluded for various reasons. So our final review included 1,158 articles, and it represents about 3% of the total published articles within that time frame. The results that I'll share with you over the next several slides represents assent procedures used with approximately 138,000 early childhood research participants. And I would say this is an estimate on the lower end because some articles did not specify the precise number of participants they had, or the authors may not have reported the specific number of early childhood participants. But a pretty large age range, or a large number of early childhood participants. And we broke those participants down into categories. So participants from birth through 11 months, 1 year to 2 years and 11 months, 5 to 6 years and 11 months, and 7 to 8 years and 11 months. And the majority of the assent procedures that were reported applied to children ages 5 to 8 years and 11 months. So kind of the older end of that early childhood age range. Here are the categories of assent. So 3% of articles reported waiving assent procedures. 41%, the majority of articles, did not provide any detail on their assent procedures. So said differently, we collected assent, but then no further details given. 32% provided minimal detail on their assent procedure. So we know they either sought written assent or verbal assent. And then 27% of the time articles included detailed procedures. So we have a little bit of a better understanding about exactly what they did. Of the 315 articles that were categorized as providing detailed procedures, 63% provided a written, pictorial, or a verbal description. 45% described the content of the question the researcher used to seek assent. And only 3% of the time did the researchers request the participant to experience the research procedures or receive a tutorial. When it comes to who seeks assent or who sought assent, this information is typically not reported. And based on the data in the current review, when it comes to frequency, so about half the time, this information is not reported. They don't tell us how often or when exactly assent is sought. But 31% of the time, it's being sought at the very beginning of the study, along with when consent is obtained. There was only 32 articles that were categorized as waiving assent. And of those articles, here is the data for the rationale provided for why assent was sought or why assent was waived. And it was almost always due to age. It's important to note that it's likely the case that assent is waived in a lot of studies much more often, but this information just isn't making it into published literature because it's being waived. So therefore, researchers, authors wouldn't necessarily be documenting that in their methodology. And then last, when assent is reported to be waived, who's making that decision? And 91% of the time, that information isn't being included in the methodology. However, there were 3 articles that reported that it was the IRB or the ethics board that made that decision. So in summary, while there is general agreement on the importance of protecting vulnerable research participants, and assent procedures may be one way to provide that additional protection, only about 3% of articles mention assent procedures. So we know it's important. Lots of fields are talking about this, but we're not necessarily mentioning it in our research procedures. When we are reporting it, almost no details are reported. So 41% of the time, even if we're saying we did it, we're not necessarily describing exactly what those procedures look like. When details are provided, what we do know is that most authors commonly include written pictorial or verbal descriptions of what their assent procedures look like. And they also might provide the content of the question asked to seek assent. We know very little about who seeks assent or the frequency of how often assent is being sought. And in general, these findings are really similar to those found by Main and Howitt in 2014, and again by Morris and colleagues just a couple years ago.
Before you crack on, could I deliver the second keyword?
Yes.
Folks, the second keyword for your CU is number 4. As we say 1, 2, 3, 4, number 4. You can add it as a number or you can type the word either way. Thank you.
Great. So it's interesting to look at the scope of methods used, assent methods used in early childhood research, and compare that scope within applied behavior analytic research. And again, out of just under 40,000 articles, assent methodology was reported in just 3% of early childhood research articles. And this is really similar to those findings of Morris and colleagues, who found that less than 1% of behavior analytic research is reporting on their assent methodology. And this finding is interesting because the results are almost identical across 2 fields. And again, I don't have Main and Howitt on here, but it would be similar to what Main and Howitt also found 10 years ago. And so it's interesting that we are seeing these results across fields consistently over time, both fields which conduct research with vulnerable populations. But these findings are concerning because it suggests that we don't know a whole lot about assent methodology being used in research. And also, we are talking about, I think as a field, we are talking about Assent more and more, and we really understand and value the importance, but we aren't yet able to capture and articulate exactly how people are doing that, which makes it really hard to replicate procedures, to train people on procedures, to know exactly how to do it. Which is something, which is a call to action, I believe, for all of us in the field. So when Assent is reported, how much detail is being provided? So for both behavior analytic and early childhood research, most of the time, no details are being provided. So again, authors are saying, we collected it, we sought it, but we're just not going to tell you exactly how we did that. And across both fields, waived assent is almost never reported. And again, not talking about waived assent makes a lot of sense when we're trying to be mindful about word counts of journal articles and not providing so much detail that we lose out on the experimental procedures that we're maybe using. However, when we remove the discussion around waived assent, it also removes opportunities to kind of understand the decision-making behind it, or what are the conditions under which it's okay to waive assent, and what are the conditions under which it's not okay to waive assent. And so by not talking about it all, I think we lose opportunities to have a thorough understanding about it. So briefly, of course, with any literature review, there are certainly limitations to the current review that I think is important to mention. We restricted our search term to assent. And so that likely excluded articles that used consent or other terms to refer to voluntary participation by children. And so we certainly could have missed some articles due to that. Secondly, reporting of assent in published articles does not provide precise information about what researchers are doing. So again, as just mentioned, many may seek assent, but just not report it due to journals' word limits. And so just because it's not making it in the methodology of a published article doesn't mean it's not happening and it's not occurring. We just couldn't extrapolate that information. And then lastly, some variables were only reported by a small number of studies. So again, those kind of conclusions or some of the points that we have been able to extrapolate regarding waived assent, the amount of generality on those items is limited just because we have a small number of articles to pull those similarities from. So what does all this mean? What do we do with these findings? What are some of the future directions that we might ask or be looking towards? First and foremost, there is agreement on the importance of seeking assent. And this is evident within applied behavior analysis. We are talking about this more and more. There are talks, there are workshops, there are trainings, people are conducting research on this topic. And this same trend is being seen in early childhood development and early childhood education. This conversation has long been discussed in pediatric medicine. And recently it's being talked more and more within mainstream media. So you can often find stuff about parenting when parents, should parents be sharing information about their children on social media? How do kids feel about that? That's a topic that people are quite interested in. If you go on TikTok or you go on YouTube, you will often find people talking about this. It also appears that reported assent methodology is increasing. And this image is from our article that that review that I was just sharing. This is assent methodology is being reported more often and is on an increasing trend within early childhood research. And we also see that we're seeing an increase in detailed procedures of assent, of what's being reported on assent. And I imagine we would see a similar pattern if we did this same kind of extrapolation within behavior analytic literature. But yet, despite its importance and its frequent conversations, and even though it's increasing, and I think we have this increasing trend that we're going to continue to see it more, descriptions of assent methodology are still seemingly absent within published literature, or we still don't have the amount of detail that we probably need. And so what does this mean for us? Well, I think first and foremost, it is a call for refined and reported assent procedures. So merely discussing assent and advocating for its implementation are insufficient to guarantee its effective execution by researchers. It seems also that researchers would like more empirically validated procedures for assent. People want to do it. They're really interested in it, but people also want confidence that the procedures that they're using are empirically validated and they're the right ones to be using and that they're doing it well. Meet Jaspers and colleagues in 2023 recently conducted a survey with behavior analytic researchers. And these authors were interested in asking questions about what applied researchers knew about consent processes as well as assent processes. And what we found in that article is that people feel pretty confident about their understanding about consent. People feel much less confident about assent processes and assent procedures. And so some of the reports from that survey is that behavior analytic researchers really would like detailed assent procedures to be reported in published manuscripts. They would like identification of evidence-based procedures for obtaining assent, and they also want training on assent methodology. So again, like, I want to do it, but I want to feel confident in the procedures that I'm using. So I think there's a call for more empirically designed procedures. And there are similar sentiments shared by Conroy and Harcourt, which are early childhood researchers. They've been advocating for more refined and reported procedures since 2009. And Jaffe and colleagues, they were interested in improving assent procedures in clinical clinical trials being conducted internationally. So what are some things that some future directions that I think our group, I think applied researchers, I think early childhood researchers can be thinking about? We should be considering whether journals, funding sources, or other institutions should promote reporting standards for assent procedures. Should these be mandated or required? Do we want people to at least include it in an appendix? So we at least have access to those, to that information. What are the best practices for seeking assent in early childhood research? What's the efficacy of different specific assent procedures? What are the prerequisite skills necessary for various types of assent? What's the ideal frequency of assent procedures? I imagine it's different for different age groups. I suspect it's different based on the type of activity that we're including that we're including participants in. And something I'm really interested in learning about is, again, what are the conditions under which I choose this way to seek assent and this way to seek assent? What are the conditions under which we're comfortable waiving assent, and what are the conditions under which we're not? And so I think those are some interesting questions that our group has been trying to answer, but that I hope that as a field we continue to kind of ask these questions and just build our evidence base so we can make, we can start moving towards best practices. Another call that our group thinks would be really helpful is just to create open source materials to support the design of evidence-based assent procedures for early childhood research. And I would say even outside of early childhood research, just applied research in general. What are researchers doing, and how can we make those tools more accessible so that more people can advocate for them? And my just last plug, I think as we continue to talk more about Assent, I think the more that our field recognizes this as being an important skill set to teach, I just hope that we continue to, help teach them, our vulnerable population, from children all the way through adulthood, how to advocate for themselves, how to negotiate, how to make meaningful choices so that they can really be a stakeholder in the therapeutic or clinical treatment they're providing, in the research that they're receiving, and to just build up that important life skill.
Thank you very, very much, Shannon. I've got a few comments and questions for you folks. Feel free to add any questions you want in the chat. I did include the link to the paper in the chat. Let me send it one more time, so that way you can easily access it. As Shannon said, it's open access, so you just literally need to click on the DOI and it should take you to the paper and you can download it. I had a question, Shannon, whether you think the diagnosis might also impact and how we request it and evaluate it and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we did find, it was interesting. So there sometimes Assent, we didn't have a clear picture on, is Assent more likely to be waived or not sought with individuals with a developmental or an intellectual disability versus others. But we certainly suspect that is the case. But we actually have you'll find some of that data in that article.
I have a comment, Shannon, that I wanted to read out to you. It says that, from my experience, Assent is often waived and hidden under the guise of best interest decisions in clients that have intellectual or learning disabilities, as we call it in the UK, which can be very problematic. And someone else also said on that topic, the best interest framework, while designed to protect, is so often used to override rather than support an individual's autonomy. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on this, if you have any.
Yeah, I love these comments, and oftentimes, right? So there are times where treatment might be medically necessary, and sometimes some of the research that we would look at when we're talking about like pediatric oncology, there may not be, a parent may say, you can't not Assent, like this is the treatment, you're in a clinical trial and this is what we're doing. I think oftentimes, and especially within behavior analytic research, let's say we're talking about assessment and treatment of problem behavior. I think there would be a lot of times where it could be easier. People could say, nope, we don't need Assent for this. It is therapeutically necessary and we've got to eliminate problem behavior. And this is just what we've got to do. But we have a lot of choices when it comes to how we do things. And there are different procedures and different ways we teach things and different styles of prompting and so I think when it comes down to research, it gets a little harder on the researcher, but you don't need to have just one single set of methods that you're using. You can actually say and give clients and their families options for how they would like to learn or the treatment that they're interested in. And so I think it requires more work. It requires more planning. It's not always going to be as clean and tight, I think, is how people want it to be when they're conducting research. But more often than not, we just got to do a better job providing more options. And that's how I think we absolutely ensure that Assent is embedded in that.
Folks, the last keyword is childhood for the CEU. The last keyword is childhood. I've got a couple more questions for you, Shannon, but let me quickly I know that some folks might want to go, so let me quickly pop once more the link to the form. If you click on this form, you can fill it out with the 3 keywords. and your email and your information and so on. Folks, also keep in mind, we have a special issue that we're organizing in our journal, Tizard Learning Disability Review, which is a peer-reviewed journal. And the special issue is entitled Reframing ABA, a Shift Towards More Progressive Practice. And we invite contributions both from researchers and practitioners who might be interested in demonstrating how they're pushing the field of ABA forwards towards more progressive and more neuro-affirming and respectful applications. Now, I have a comment that I thought I would read out to you, Shannon. We need to educate commissioners and others and have agreed communications for this, which I think is a valid point, isn't it? As you said, there's so much variability out there in Assent. Like, what do you mean exactly and how do you assess it? That's such a valid point that came out from your paper. And I have a question for you from a colleague who is asking, when coding, pulling the data, did you find any patterns that you felt were surprising or any patterns that were evident?
Yeah, well, I think one of the, and again, this is kind of, people, we all think Assent is important. Across fields for the last 40 years, people have been, we are talking about how important Assent is, but we're still just not really talking exactly how to do it. And I think because it's hard and it's hard to do it systematically. And so I think like one of the biggest patterns is just the lack thereof of very operationally defined procedures. But one of the things that was quite interesting is also the importance of dissent and knowing that to seek assent, we also have to have a really good understanding of what dissent looks like. And that is not necessarily just somebody saying, I don't want to do it, but we're going to see it in body language. We're going to see it in kids maybe not feeling well or trying to, get out of things. And so dissent is another piece that I think there's a lot of agreement and understanding that we all think this is important, but that needs to be a part of our data collection procedures. The other piece, and I think this kind of goes on to educating commissioners and others. One of the pieces, and again, pattern, but I would say lack thereof, or the lack of a pattern, is to also design assent procedures that are going to be adopted by the communities that we're working in. It also requires us to really have a good understanding of the opinions and the feelings about assent and research and consent within different communities and populations. And so that was also interesting out here to survey. We have Abu Dhabi, the UAE in general, is like 89% of the population are expats from all over the world. There's only about 11% of the population that are Emiratis from the United Arab Emirates. And so you get people from all over the world. And there was a lot of like parents who said, I don't care if my child doesn't want to do it. Like in my home, in my culture, when an adult tells a child to do something, the expectation is that they do it. And as a researcher, I would prefer you make my child do the thing that I've signed them up for. And so I also think there is a piece on, we've also got to understand how different communities and how different people feel about assent. And I do think we have to educate, but also be mindful that people's opinions on this are quite different. And so there's that social acceptability piece that I also find interesting to explore, something I'd be interested in learning more about.
It's a very valid point about, in a way, cultural adaptations to how you conceptualize assent, not only how you kind of just, like collect data on it or whatnot. That's a very valid point, actually, because I suppose assent will look very different across different cultures. Very fair. Okay, I have a lot of thank yous, as you've probably noticed in the chat. So many people are saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And I can see that many people stayed behind for that bit of extra time. So thank you guys for that as well. Someone says super interesting. Thank you for sharing these patterns with us. That's an important topic you're working on. Someone says, I think Assent procedures for learning disability populations or intellectual disability populations, as we call them internationally, need to be simplified. For example, I was reading about concurrent change methodology, which is quite resource intensive to create. Honoring Assent withdrawal is a good starting point. Well, fair point. Thank you very much. Very interesting and so on. Okay, I think we can conclude here then. Shannon, thank you very much again. Dr. Ward, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we will have you back in the future to talk more to us about your really important line of research that you've unpacked very briefly today. You've been busy with your 9 studies. Bless your heart. So thank you very much. And thank you all. I will process your CEUs soon, and I will post our next behavioral talk information soon as well. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.